Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, is usually a softly spoken man, but he's a man who has a powerful voice. When the chairman of the Federal Reserve speaks, markets listen and the world reacts. Ordinarily, the chairman of the Fed will restrain themselves heavily in the way they speak, talking in relatively nuanced terms so not to move the markets or ruffle feathers too much. It's very rare for Jerome Powell to be absolutely direct and upfront, but that is exactly what he did on this occasion. He spoke out directly against the myths and the fabrications propagated by Trump.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated, and the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. Tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation. The inflationary effects could also be more persistent.
You see, the chairman of the Federal Reserve is an economist who cannot lie knowingly. Unlike Trump and his acolytes, because there's so much consequence on what he says, he's not somebody who's going to engage in deliberately misleading people. And so what he said is this: contrary to the fictions and fabrications promoted by the Trump administration, tariffs will actually harm the US economy. Tariffs will lead to an increase in inflation. And the tariffs, placed as high as they have been, higher than anybody expected, are also likely to impede economic growth. So there's an economic price to pay for the imposition of tariffs. All he did is state what everybody already knows. But the fact that he stated it, that he stuck his neck out to speak the truth, is what led to an instant reaction in the markets, and a nosedive ensued.
Breaking news in the stock market at this hour, the rocky fallout from President Trump's tariff negotiations continuing at this hour.
The top 500 stocks, it is a sea of red today, fueling the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell telling the Economic Club of Chicago tariffs came in much larger than anticipated, and they will lead to higher inflation.
Major averages finishing sharply lower, though off their worst levels of the day. The Dow down 700 points, the S&P 500 falling more than 2%, and the Nasdaq dropping more than 3%. The 10-year yield also taking a hit on the back of today's comments, falling back below 4.3%.
Now, people aren't used to hearing the truth from any part of this administration, but this is one part of the federal government that can't engage in spinning fantasies. You see, the job of the Federal Reserve is to essentially stabilize the economy. Their main mandate is to keep inflation under control. And the way they do that is by using interest rates. When inflation gets too high, they raise interest rates to bring inflation down. Now, normally, this isn't that complex a process to engage in, because usually inflation only starts to rise up when the economy is heating up, i.e. when the economy is growing fast. And so things start to cost more when the economy is really doing well and growth levels are really high and it feels like it's all overheating a bit. So what they can do then is start to slam on the brakes by raising interest rates, i.e. raising the cost of borrowing, so people can spend less, so it dampens the economy down a little bit and then brings inflation under control. So that's the main function of the Fed. And when the economy is slowing down too much and it looks like things are heading too far towards recession and inflation is far away from the economic picture, then they can drop interest rates to allow the economy to grow some more. It'll be easier to borrow, people can spend more easily, and so growth happens more. But because they have to keep their eye on inflation, they can't just keep interest rates low all the time and keep fueling growth. So it's a subtle balancing act that they have to play all the time. And every country in the world does this. In the UK, the Bank of England does the same. It's called the Bank of England Monetary Committee, which used to be led by Mark Carney, now the Prime Minister of Canada. So this is a high-level job that is all about fine-tuning. Now, the one thing that totally hacks this equation to pieces is tariffs, because it does something extraordinary. Not only does it slow down the economy, because it reduces the ability of consumers to buy products coming from abroad, and also because you always get retaliatory tariffs, reduces the ability to sell products abroad, so it suppresses economic growth. But at the same time as suppressing economic growth, it also raises prices, because you're having to pay these import taxes, these tariffs on all products you bring in from abroad, the prices of those products then get passed on to the consumer, and so it increases prices too. So it does something pretty unique. It causes destruction in both ways. It dampens the economy and it actually raises inflation, i.e. hikes up prices. So this puts the Fed in a real fix because their job is to help grow the economy but also keep inflation under control. And this is the one thing that makes it almost impossible, because what you end up getting is something called stagflation, which is inflation in the context of a stagnant economy. So it's not inflation caused by an overheating economy, which you normally see. It's inflation within the context of an economy that's not really growing at all.
So that would suggest that the Fed is preparing itself for some form of stagflation, where growth slows to almost nothing, inflation remains high, unemployment starts to rise, and they're only powered to do one versus the other, which would be dealing with inflation.
So it was absolutely right and entirely professional for Jerome Powell to come out and say, honestly, this is exactly what we are now facing as a result of Trump's nonsensical tariff policy. And now, of course, Trump is stuck because, without doubt, the White House is reeling as a result of this. The White House is furious. What Trump actually wants Powell to do, and he says it openly, is to reduce interest rates. But if you reduce interest rates when inflation is already set to go up because of the tariffs being imposed, you're going to see rampant inflation. And this actually often happens in authoritarian regimes. Inflation goes crazy because the dear leader is only interested in economic growth and giving people lots of money. But because you can't do that without rising inflation, it leads to the value of money going down all the time. And so people actually end up suffering as a net consequence of that cocktail. So Trump has actually been pushing Powell to reduce interest rates, which, as I say, is against the interests of the US economy, against the Federal Reserve's mandate, and so he's not going to do it. And now, after making this statement, without doubt, Trump and his team are furious. But they're stuck because, on the one hand, doing nothing shows that essentially Powell is right, and they're powerless to do anything about it or to try to reframe the narrative. I mean, they'll obviously continue to fantasize and fabricate, and if they try to undermine him by actually removing from his post and sacking him, it will cause an instant tailspin in the markets, because there's nothing that suggests chaos more strongly than an established chair of the Federal Reserve being sacked for no reason other than, as we all know, speaking the truth. So Trump effectively can't do that right now either. But if he did, he'd almost certainly make things worse. Now we can see what a bind Trump is in the way he then responded the following day. He did something a little bit unusual for Trump in that he issued a statement that was a bit vague. What he said is that the termination of Jerome Powell from his position as chairman of the Federal Reserve cannot come soon enough. He didn't say that he fired him, and he didn't say that he wouldn't fire him either. He's in this awkward place in the middle where he's kind of trying to remove him, but not quite. The truth is, it's not even within the president's powers to remove him from that post. But that hasn't actually stopped Trump from trying to remove a whole load of other senior office holders in various federal bodies already. So it would be true to form if he actually went ahead and did that. But he's not doing it because he's constrained by the market reaction. So he can't do what he wants to do, but he's got to issue a statement instead to demonstrate some defiance. So he ends up doing something using a little bit of unclear wording. His termination can't come soon enough. Just demonstrating how impotent Trump now is in the face of economic truth. This is what happens when the parts of the system that are designed to ensure stability come up against an administration like Trump's. It's like the sunlight shining through into a dark cave. Now, nobody can ever pretend that they didn't know how economically illiterate his tariff policy truly was. Thank you for watching my video. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm also interested in philosophy and public policy and politics. I aim to make a number of videos about these subjects and particularly the intersection between them. If you're able to like and subscribe to this channel, then it'll really help, and also put in some comments whenever you can. That'll really help the algorithm. It'll really help promote this channel to other people. Now, beyond that, we are all, unfortunately, at the behest of a very small number of people who seem to run everything these days. And we are all at the whim of a tech oligarch who could decide tomorrow to end a channel like this because it's not in their favor. And because of that, I've set up a kind of email newsletter, which you can subscribe to. At the top of the channel, you'll see a web address. please go there and subscribe to my newsletter. That way you can stay in touch with the videos I'm making. At least we can keep the content flowing. So I hope you can do that, and I hope we can keep talking and also gain clarity, not just about what's happening right now, but how we can get through this, how we can improve things to make a better tomorrow together. Thank you.